Two gay male flamingos are apparently raising a chick at the San Diego Zoo. This strange story surprisingly tells us a lot about where we are in the human world and what we actually think about children and the family. Also, Will Ferrell's got a documentary on Netflix about his so-called transgender friend, and Gavin Newsom is coming out with a horrifying new piece of legislation regarding IVF and same-sex couples. We've got all of that on today's episode of Relatable. It's brought to you by Crowd Health. Go to joincrowdhealth.com/Allie. That's joincrowdhealth.com/Allie. Hey guys, welcome to Relatable. Happy Thursday. Hope everyone is having a wonderful week so far. Before we get into our stories today, hopefully a little more lighthearted than what we have needed to discuss over the past couple days. It'll be a shorter episode than the last couple days, which have been like these mega hour and a half almost long episodes, but that's because there's so much to cover. Before we get into today's episodes though, and today's stories, I do want to tell you about our awesome merch, our Jesus Wins merch. Look how cool this hat is. It's stitched on there, really high quality. Jesus Wins, got the little relatable hit on the back. And you can go to alliemerch.com. You can use code Allie10 for 10% off. But we've got crew necks, we've got hoodies, and we've got these awesome hats. We've also got, this is the rope hat style, but we've got the dad hat style too. They're just really high quality items. And I've been wanting this message on merchandise for a while. It's just a reminder. This is our Father's world. Jesus wins in the end. His eternal plan of redemption is always going off without a hitch. It's not meant to say be apathetic because Jesus is coming back. It's meant to say ultimately he wins in the end. And so our attitude is always one of victory. It's always one of gratitude. It's always one of joy, just as the Christian attitude has been for the past 2,000 years. We understand that the gates of hell will not prevail against the church. No matter what kind of chaos and disorder we see outside of our window or we see on social media, we know that God is in charge. He's not surprised or taken aback by anything. And so even as we are navigating these very turbulent waters of our times, we can be in perfect peace because we worship the God who commands the waves, who calms the storms. And so these items are just a reminder of that. So you can go to alliemerch.com, get your hat, get your items. It's almost Christmas season too. So you should probably start thinking about what Allie merch you're going to be getting, the Related Gal in your life. And I even saw Related Bro post a picture with this because it is gender neutral. So we've got items for our Related Bros too, and hopefully more to come. Anyway, we got to talk about this very important story that we have been trying to talk about for a while. We've been trying to fit it into an episode and just haven't been able to because we've got Iran, we've got Israel, we've got debates, and yet maybe perhaps the most pressing story of the day is that two gay flamingos are raising a child together. Yes, you heard that correctly. I just wanted to take a pause there for you to just take that all in. Okay, this is being reported by Fox 5. This is actually an important story just because of what we're going to draw from it, even if it sounds a little bit silly, but this is where we are as a world, okay? According to Fox 5, last month, Fox 5 San Diego reported on a pair of male flamingos at the San Diego Zoo. Of course it's San Diego. Of course it's California. Like, you're not seeing this. It's not like, oh, two gay flamingos outside of Birmingham. Of course not. No one's like, oh, the gay flamingos in West Virginia. No, of course this is happening in California. San Diego Zoo Safari Park, who they claim are a same-sex couple, having successfully welcomed a baby chick together. Now, let's just think about this, boys and girls. Now, these are the same people who claim that we need to have comprehensive sex ed and who claim that we should follow the science. They're saying a same-sex flamingo couple, we can just stop right there, right? In Darwin, who, is I'm guessing, languishing in Hades right now. But if he could roll over in his grave, he would be rolling over in his grave, because even Darwin and all of his ignorance and all of the nonsense that he pushed understood the impossibility of something like this. The newly minted dads, Fox 5 said, hatched their chick on August 25th. Now, again, if your mind is just try to read this to anyone outside of the United States. Please go to Africa, go to China, go to India, go to South Korea and read this to them. Anyone, the members of our dear silent generation, read this to your grandmother and see if she can understand what is being said. After some time bonding behind the scenes, the family is now out for public viewing at the Escondido Park. So how in the world did this happen? First of all, how do we have homo flamingos? How? That's the first question. And then how did they defy biology to welcome a baby flamingo together? That's the big question of the day, right? Well, you're just going to have to wait. You're going to have to hold on to your horses, to your flamingos for just a second, because I got to pause and tell you about our first sponsor for the day. In the midst of all of this craziness and degeneracy that we see in the world, there is a parallel economy that is rising up, and it is competing with these godless organizations and entities that take our money and then fund politicians that hate us and work against everything we're fighting for. And this parallel economy is being led primarily by Christian conservatives at businesses like 7 Weeks Coffee. I got to meet the couple that started 7 Weeks Coffee at Share the Arrows. They provided the coffee for Share the Arrows. They are awesome. They're passionate about coffee, they're passionate about godly values, and they're passionate about saving baby lives. So they've combined all of those passions into this company, 7 Weeks Coffee. It's called 7 Weeks because at 7 weeks gestation, that baby in the womb is the size of a coffee bean. So they donate 10% of every sale to a pro-life pregnancy center. And they have donated over $500,000 to pro-life organizations, saving thousands of lives through their donations. It's really incredible. And it's really, really high quality coffee. It tastes awesome. That's what I prefer in our home. So if you go to the 7weekscoffee.com and use code Allie, you'll save an additional 10% on your order, in addition to the 15% that you save by subscribing to their Heartbeat Club. Go to 7weeks.com, code Allie. Okay, according to the Wildlife Alliance, the two bonded males began sitting on a nest earlier this year, prompting the safari park's care specialist to give the couple a fake egg to keep them busy and prevent them from interfering with others' shelters. According to Fox 5, the two immediately began caring for the placebo, alternating brooding responsibilities. After a bit of time, the Wildlife Alliance says specialists swapped out the fake egg for a real one for them to foster. Okay, let's think about what happened here, okay? So we're hearing that flamingos, that these two male flamingos defied everything we know about reality to create an egg. That's what the headline was, that they raised a child together. In reality, they stole an egg from this flamingo's actual mother and gave it to these two male flamingos. What does that sound like? That almost sounds like the egg selling and surrogacy industry that we have in the human world, because that's basically what happens. You have two men who buy the DNA, the eggs from one woman, rent the womb of another woman to purposely create a motherless child. And that is one of the most wicked things in our world today, that we not only allow, but actually celebrate and call inclusion and love. And now we are seeing it in the animal kingdom. This is what the story goes on to say. Now that it's hatched, the two dads have been caring for the baby chick, who was like, that baby chick is like, where's the heck is my mom? Where is my mom? But of course, this poor baby chick can't talk, just like human babies, who are wondering the same thing, by the way. Because not only are they missing their genetic mother when they are born via egg selling and surrogacy, but they're also missing the only woman, the only home that they've ever known that they have physiologically bonded with for 9 to 10 months inside the womb, knowing her smell, her feeling, her heartbeat. Biologically, babies long for that after they are born. That's why we do skin to skin when babies are born, because it regulates their body temperature, it regulates their heartbeat, it regulates their breathing. I know this firsthand. I've watched this happen 3 times now as a mom of 3. It's one thing when a mom puts her baby up for adoption and has to give that baby away. It is another thing to intentionally create that broken motherless situation through surrogacy and through egg selling. Remember, I know I'm kind of going back and forth between the parallels here, but remember, adoption redeems an already broken situation. That baby has already been created. And egg selling, sperm selling, surrogacy creates a broken situation, because even if you've got a heterosexual couple that's using a surrogate, you are still severing that bond that is meant to be there at birth. And we may never know the full effects of that primal wound. But even more so is the evil of creating purposely motherless children. I mean, how babies long for their moms, the comfort, the touch, the feel, the stability, the softness of the mother that is so necessary for development, especially in those early years. To purposely rob a child of that is just so selfish. And now this is what humans do, because humans, we seek in our sinful flesh, we seek validation and affirmation of our choices. And so, I mean, that's part of what happens in this egg selling surrogacy process. These men are seeking validation for their choices and affirmation of their choices, which is why a lot of times these kids are gaslit into not verbalizing their want for a mother, their desire to know who their mom is. But the creation of these motherless children and even fatherless children, it's a form of, yes, maybe you really do want to raise these children, but it's also a form of just affirming and validating your choices. And so not only are adults putting that on children, but they are also putting that on animals. They're using what is probably just like normal flamingo behavior, 2 dude flamingos hanging out. Like, they're probably talking about super like dude flamingo stuff. They're probably like, see that chick over there? Like, she's so hot. Did you see what happened with fantasy football last night? They have no idea that the weirdo zookeepers are calling them a bunch of homos, a bunch of fancy flamingos. They would be so offended if they knew that. And now they're left with this baby chick and they're like, what do we do? And everyone's like, oh, these are gay birds. And they're really not. But it's looking for affirmation for your own degenerate choices. And it actually, it reminds me of the idolatry, the pagan idolatry that you see throughout history, the worshiping of animals, replacing the worship of the real God, replacing the worship of the Creator for worship of the creation in order to justify your most base desires. That's very Romans 1. If you ask me. The article claims that same-sex parenting among flamingos is a well-documented phenomenon, experts say, although it is still relatively rare. I'd say we wouldn't really have any more animals. However, it is at least the second instance of it in the United States this year. Back in August, a pair of male Chilean flamingos at a Colorado zoo successfully hatched and raised a chick together. They didn't hatch and raise a chick together. They didn't. A poor mama flamingo was like, where is my baby? And literally just to affirm human sexual degeneracy, they steal this baby from this mom. Crazy. The zoo claims they don't know how this happened, but that the most likely scenario is that the egg was abandoned by another couple, so the male flamingos adopted it. Romans 1:24. Therefore, God gave them up in the lusts of their hearts to impurity, to the dishonoring of their bodies among themselves, because they exchanged the truth about God for a lie, and worshipped and served the creature rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. For this reason, God gave them up to dishonorable passions, for their women exchanged natural relations for those that are contrary to nature. And the men likewise gave up natural relations with women and were consumed with passion for one another, men committing shameless acts with men and receiving in themselves the due penalty for their error. The conspiracy theorists who say that homosexuality, the prohibition against it, was just added to the Bible in 1948, always leave out Romans 1. And all of the other references to sexual morality, the positive definitions of what holy sexuality and marriage actually look like. It's really just a form of blue anon that kind of blows my mind. Romans 1 could not be more abundantly clear. So it really shouldn't be difficult for us to stand up for what is true. Remember, Christians have always been a refuge for children. Everywhere Christian feet have been on the ground throughout the history of civilization, we have said the child sacrifice stops now. The human sacrifice stops now. The sexual degeneracy stops now. And we should have the same boldness. It's not about political power. It's about infusing righteousness and goodness into every sphere we occupy. Because if we believe that God is the creator, that his ways are better, that God is love, then the most loving thing we can do is agree with God in all circumstances. You cannot compartmentalize the belief that God is the creator and authority over all things and how you interact in the rest of your life. So just remember that. Well, we've got some more silliness happening in the advocacy of the LGBTQ lifestyle, this time on Netflix. We've got Will Ferrell saying that his longtime friend has become a woman and he just totally doesn't understand what the big deal is. So we'll get into that in just a second. Let me pause and tell you about our second sponsor, another amazing pro-life company that I love so much, and that is EveryLife. EveryLife is a pro-life diaper company. Unfortunately, a lot of those big diaper companies that you'd hope just naturally would be pro-baby and pro-life are actually pro-abortion. They pay their employees when they want to go across state lines to get an abortion, they fund those abortions. They send their money to pro-abortion politicians. And if you don't want to be a part of that, but you don't want to compromise on the ingredients, the quality of your diapers, then you need to start getting your diapers from EveryLife. We use EveryLife in our home. We absolutely love them. They work really well. I can feel confident. There's no fragrances or any of the fake ingredients that I would need to worry about in these diapers. And plus, I love being able to trust that my dollars are going to a company that supports the same values that I do. Right now, they're donating diapers to the Southeast, parents who need these items because of Hurricane Helene and the devastation there. They're getting these items from EveryLife. So buy a bundle on everylife.com. Their Buy for a Cause bundle will go straight to those families. Plus, if you buy diapers for yourself, use my code Allie10. You'll get 10% off your order. Everylife.com, code Allie10. All right, Will Ferrell. He released a new documentary with his now transgender, quote unquote. We always say quote unquote or so-called or what's referred to because there's no such thing as transitioning your gender. Gender and sex are one and the same. They're not two different categories. Even some people on our side of things try to separate those two and say that gender is expression and your sex is your biology, or some people will say gender doesn't exist. I think that's just a completely faulty way to go. Gender and sex are interchangeable. They are. I remember I had a professor in college who tried to separate those two things. And this person looking back, she was very androgynous herself. But of course, this was probably 2012. I had no concept of what transgender was. At least I don't think so. I think the only term I knew was transvestite at that point. And she said something about the difference between sex and gender, how they're two different things. And I wasn't trying to be political or contentious. I just said, they're not two different things. They're the same thing. And she didn't say anything. She just kind of moved on and furrowed her brow. And I don't remember anyone else speaking up or looking at me or being like, well, that was brave, because I wasn't trying to be brave. I just knew at the time that that was nonsense. And I'm not even sure I understood the ideology behind it. Maybe I did, and I'm just not remembering correctly, but I at least knew something in me knew that I needed to correct that. But it's so funny because at that time, like the consensus would have been on my side completely, and she could have actually gotten punished, even though this was a secular school, for spouting something so radical. Oh, how the turntables, as Michael Scott would say, because now we've got a Netflix series saying that a man who has lived as a man his entire life is now a woman and should be accepted as a woman and should be able to go into women's spaces to be regarded as a woman. And Will Ferrell's just like, it's no big deal. Who cares? Like, he's just happy. Well, remember, Will Ferrell is a multi-millionaire who has already, he's made his career in Hollywood. He's a man himself and he has sons. And so these people who always claim they're on the side of empathy, I guess, has a hard time understanding why we as women, as moms and parents who have daughters, why we would not want these men entering our spaces, sharing our bathrooms, sharing our locker rooms, competing in sports against our children. But of course, he probably does have those doubts in his mind, but he knows it's unpopular to verbalize those, and he got paid big bucks from Netflix for this silly documentary. So his now transgender identifying friend, Andrew Steele, who currently goes by the name Harper. It's always a little bit like put the lotion in the basket for me when I hear them come up with their names. Like it's just it freaks me out a little bit. I'm like, how'd you come up with this name? It's nothing, at least, Dylan Mulvaney. Remember that guy? At least he goes by the same name. Like I never thought that I would be saying maybe Dylan Mulvaney is more on the same side of the spectrum when it comes to gender deception, but at least he goes by the same name. I want to know, because so often I see these stories, especially on like the transgender Reddit posts that are shared on X, of these men saying that they now identify as women and taking on the name of someone that they had a crush on, because these men aren't gay, by the way, most of the time. They're still attracted to women. So they take a name of someone that they had a crush on when they were growing up, or someone that they wanted to be like, someone that they had like secret fantasies about, someone that they've seen in pornography. I just want to know, like, how did you pick this name that is nothing like Andrew? So this guy now goes by the name Harper, and this documentary, Will and Harper, aims to evoke empathy. One might say toxic empathy for the trans identifying friend, and to normalize so-called transgenderism in the mainstream while ignoring any real concerns over science, safety, and fairness. Some also are pointing out that the movie itself disproves the narrative of so-called transgender hate because Steele is treated warmly by people all over the country, which I think is good. Like, I do think just in like a personal interaction, you can treat anyone, no matter who they are, warmly. But that does not mean we have to be open to accepting a man who thinks that he's a woman or says that he's a woman into our private spaces, nor should we be bullied or pressured in any way to affirm their delusions and to say that 2 + 2 = 5. So most of the film focuses on the personal relationship between the two friends, but in one scene, Ferrell takes a picture with Indiana Governor Eric Holcomb, and he laments his regret over not confronting him about the state's ban on so-called gender-affirming care. According to the New York Post, the movie itself proves that generally people are kind. In the film, the pair visit an Oklahoma dive bar adorned with pro-Trump flags, and Steele arrives solo, striking up friendly chats with some locals. Then Ferrell enters, and they are serenaded by Native Americans as a toothless man, nursing a bottled beer, preaches acceptance. The stranger is welcoming and sweet. This other person at a racetrack, both encounters prompt Steele to admit, I'm not afraid of these people. Well, Republicans in general are way, 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 way nicer to people that they disagree with or people that they don't align with than liberals are. I mean, I guarantee you, if you made a documentary of someone with a MAGA hat, that's not even something that is like intrusive, like a man trying to enter into women's spaces. and he went to a bar in New York, I guarantee you he would probably be physically assaulted. Because remember, politics is the religion of the left. It is their theology. It is their driving force. It's actually what drives their theology. Everything that they think about the Bible is actually first it goes through the prism of politics, and they're vying for power, which is ironic because they're always projecting on Christian conservatives, saying that we are the ones vying for power simply because we don't want babies to be killed inside the womb. But remember, that is projection. It is manipulation. It is a silencing tactic. They are the ones constantly vying for bigger government, suppression of speech, forcing you to agree with and celebrate their ideology. Leftists worship politics, which is why when you are considered a blasphemer and you're outside of their religious dogma, they treat you with such antipathy. So it doesn't surprise me at all that this person was treated nicely. He said there is hatred out there. It's very real and it's very unsafe for trans people in certain situations. But I don't know why trans people are meant to be threatening to me as a cis male. This is what Will Ferrell said. I don't know why Harper is threatening to me. Well, he's not, because you're bigger than him and you're a man. You don't have daughters, and I guess you just don't care about reality. You don't care about biology. I'm sure you really care about the science of climate change and the science of COVID vaccines, but you don't care about the basic existential science of male and female, without which none of us would be here. But you can't see how a denial of reality, the insistence that 2 + 2 = 5 is a threat to absolutely everyone, even if you were to put to the side the rights and the safety and the protection of women. You can't see that? I bet you could. But there's consequences for seeing and expressing reality, and he doesn't want to bear those consequences because it's much comfier not to. He said, it's so strange to me because Harper is finally her. If the trans community is a threat to you, I think it stems from not being confident or safe with yourself. Oh my gosh, that was funnier than anything you ever said in Talladega Nights. That was hilarious. Yeah, you're right. You're right. If a little girl doesn't want to walk into, say, a bathroom with her mother at a gym and see a grown man with long hair and lipstick standing there sexually aroused, I mean, by the way, this has happened at a Planet Fitness as well as We Spa in LA. If she doesn't want to see that, if she doesn't want to participate in that, it's because that little girl isn't confident in herself. If women don't want to compete against men who are bigger and stronger and faster than them biologically, inherently, and have been from the time of puberty onward, it's just because they're insecure, not because they care about fairness. See, this is why the right beats the left in debates, because the left never has to see our perspective. They're never forced to see our side. They never contend with our arguments, but we are always forced to see their side and formulate an argument against it. And that's why whenever I enter into like some kind of adversarial or a debate context, I always over-prepare. I'm never overconfident in those situations because you just never know whether I'm in front of Congress or whether I am debating someone one-on-one. But I am always struck by the utter ignorance of progressives when it comes to what we actually believe and why, or even what we're debating. I encourage you to go watch the debate. I'll link it in the description here, between me and between a so-called non-binary teacher for the Ellen Fisher podcast. We recorded it several months ago. And, he was respectful, but you will see how vapid their side is and how just absolutely rock solid our side is. I'm very proud of, if I can say that without it sounding like, self-aggrandizing at all, but I'm very proud of how that debate went. I'm very grateful for how it went, and I'm so thankful to God for the clarity that he gives us in his word, but also just the common grace of science and logic. All of these things God created and that we get to employ. And it's so much better than this toxic empathy that just says, feel how this proposed victim feels and blind yourself to morality or reality. That's not the Christian way. The Christian way, as I tried very hard to exemplify in that debate, is the truth and love approach. It's more persuasive, it's more effective, and it actually leads us to make righteous decisions rather than just emotional, dumb ones. Also, encourage you, if you haven't yet, please pre-order my book, Toxic Empathy. We go through this subject of gender, sexuality. We go through social justice, immigration, abortion, and we look at how toxic empathy is employed to persuade you to be on the left side of these issues. And then we look at the other side of the issue, who is affected by the progressive position. And then we ask the most important question, but what is true? So we look at what's historically true, scientifically true, logically true, most importantly, what is biblically true. You will be so beyond equipped for every conversation about these subjects after you read this book. So go to toxicempathy.com. You can order the book there. Also, you can get it on Amazon. That really helps because Amazon has the majority of these books. Toxicempathy.com or buy Toxic Empathy on Amazon. All right, before we get into the rest of this, let me pause. I'll tell you about our next sponsor, and that's Hillsdale College. Y'all, I love Hillsdale College. This is a great alternative. If you have high school age kids and you're thinking about their education after high school, they think they want to go to college, but you don't want to send them to one of these communist indoctrination factories. Unfortunately, that characterizes a lot of our universities. You really need to look at Hillsdale. This is a university that teaches time-tested Christian virtues as well as really teaching kids, not teaching, young adults, not just what to think as far as the content of history and literature and all of the different subjects, but also how to think critically, how to speak persuasively. What really is the history of our Constitution and our country? They will learn objective truth at Hillsdale. And right now they're offering 40 free online courses to people like you. You can learn about the works of C.S. Lewis, the stories in the book of Genesis, the meaning of the U.S. Constitution, the rise and fall of the Roman Empire, the history of the ancient Christian church. All of this so good, so edifying. Go to hillsdale.edu/relatable to enroll. It's totally free. It's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/relatable, hillsdale.edu/relatable. Ferrell said that he had zero knowledge about the trans community before Harper came out to him. He said, I had met trans people, but I didn't have anyone personally in my life, so this was all new territory for me, which is why I think this film is so exciting for us to kind of put out there in the world. There's a chance all of us in the cis community to be able to ask questions and also just to listen and be there as a friend to discuss this journey. But see, the questions that are being asked by Will Ferrell aren't like, okay, so like, do you are really you're going to share a bathroom with these women? The questions are just like, how do you feel? Does this make you happy? Are you your authentic self? We are sold this lie about authenticity, even Christians, that authenticity is our highest virtue, that if you're not living, quote unquote, authentically, then you're going to be unhappy, that you're living a lie, that it's the most awful thing to do. But look, authenticity, it can be good. We want to be honest. We don't want to be fake. We don't want to put up a facade, but it has to be in submission to truth. Not just objective truth, scientific, observable reality, but most importantly, it has to be submissive to biblical truth. So it is not the most important thing we as Christians know to do whatever you feel like doing, to follow your flesh, to follow all of your desires to ultimate fulfillment, because not all of our thoughts and desires or feelings are good. Now, we live in a world that says all of your feelings are valid. All of your feelings are not valid. They may all be real, but valid means that they're rooted in truth. Some of our feelings are just downright lies. And so we have to submit all of our feelings, all of our thoughts, our very identity, the core of who we are, to Christ. And within that paradigm, yes, we can live authentically in submission to Christ and the standards that he has set for us. When authenticity becomes your highest value without submitting to absolute truth, it becomes an excuse for sin. The same thing with autonomy, has the same prefix there. Authenticity, autonomy, that AU, it has to do with the self, like automatic. And whenever you create authenticity and autonomy as your highest values, they become excuses for sin. Both of these things can be good in submission to absolute truth, in submission to Christ. And that's what happens when we exchange the God of self, which we all once followed, with the God of Scripture. All of our desires, our control even over our own body, no longer is just about us and what we want to do, but about Christ, and his ways are better. And if you're thinking, well, that's fine for you because you're a Christian, you can't force everyone to believe that. No, I can't force everyone to believe that. But look, every single law, every single policy, restriction, or regulation, or even definition in our public sphere is the product of a worldview. The only question is ever which one. We also have bought this lie that believing that men can become women, transgenderism, LGBTQ ideology, that's all neutral. And it's fine if progressives are able to define these things in law for us or in curriculum, but it's wrong for Christians to define gender or marriage in the public sphere. One, we're told, is Christian nationalism and theocracy. The other one is just, neutral. But the progressive worldview is not neutral. Again, it's its own religion with its own ideas of human worth, human existence, right and wrong, sin, holiness, repentance, even its own eschatology. It's thought of like what the future world should look like. And so it's not neutral. So why should progressives have more of a right to inform the public sphere about these very important identity-related issues, but Christians have no right to do so? Again, that's a silencing and manipulation tactic. Someone pointed out, and this is very true, even if you were to just kind of put the worldview stuff to the side, which I actually, now that I say that, this still isn't really putting the worldview stuff to the side, but most people, without even thinking of their worldview, could see the harm in this. Someone pointed out on X, Will Ferrell is not an incarcerated woman who has to bunk with a rapist. He's not a 14-year-old girl who has to share her school bathroom with boys. He's not a female athlete. He's a rich, out-of-touch man. Remember, in several prisons across the country and around the world, there are men who just have to say that they're women who are sharing a cell with vulnerable women. And these are men who are in prison because of child rape, because of the rape of women. Some of them are murderers. And in states like Washington, California, Oregon, Illinois, New York, these men who just say that they're women are incarcerated with these very vulnerable women. There are reports out of California that women in prison have been impregnated by these men. That's insane. This is evil. This is wrong. If you cannot speak up against this, I'm sorry, I just don't trust that you're going to be able to stand up for the gospel. If you cannot speak up for Genesis 1:27, I do not believe you when you say that you will stand up for John 14:6. Okay, this is basic observable stuff. The gospel actually has to be discerned with the Spirit. If you can't stand up for scientific reality, I just have a hard time believing you're going to stand up for the spiritual reality, the far more controversial truth that without Christ, someone is going to hell. So, use this as a warm-up for you. Use this as a test for your courage. The Christian church is built on courage. Christian history, church history is built on courage, not the cowardice and compromise of Christians, but courage. And this is about doing what Christians have always done, which is not only stand up for the gospel and to do good works, but also to speak out against the evil ideologies of the day. That is why, in part, Christians were burned at the stake, fed to lions, because by nature of their biblical beliefs, they spoke out against the ruling ideologies and philosophies of the day that were held by people in power to solidify their power. And that's what Christians are doing today when they speak up for life inside the womb, when they speak out against gender deception and gender confusion. So let's stand on the shoulders of the brave Christians that have gone before us and be completely unapologetic about this. Doesn't mean we have to be harsh, doesn't mean we have to be mean, doesn't mean we have to be hateful, but we also cannot listen to the world when they call us mean and hateful for saying what is true. Stephen was full of grace and truth. He was kind, and yet he shared unapologetically the gospel to the audience before him. And yet he was stoned to death. We cannot measure our obedience by the world's reaction to us. You just continue to obey and say what is true. All right, speaking of speaking up against wicked policies of wicked rulers, let's talk about Gavin Newsom and what he's got going on in the state of California. But first, let me pause and tell you about our next sponsor. That's America's Christian Credit Union. Unfortunately, we have to worry about something called debanking, where financial institutions decide because they don't like what you have to say, they don't like what you believe and what you stand for, that they're no longer going to work with you. You don't want to be put in that situation. So work with a Christian financial institution that aligns with your values. That's America's Christian Credit Union. It was started by a group of pastors who wanted to be able to serve their congregants, and now they've spread throughout the country. They have 30,000 shared ATMs or ATMs nationwide, 5,000 shared branches. For a limited time, you can earn $400 when you open a new checking account with them. Plus, my listeners get an additional $100 bonus with the promo code Allie at checkout. Go to americaschristiancu.com/Allie. americaschristiancu.com/Allie. America's Christian Credit Union is federally insured by the NCUA. So in the state of California, Gavin Newsom says that he is making insurance companies pay for in vitro fertilization. Now, I won't get into all of the background on my take on the ethics of IVF because I've done several episodes on that. I know it's probably one of my most controversial subjects that I talk about, but I do encourage you to go back and watch those because I've got so many perspectives from so many people. I've got the perspective of doctors who used to practice IVF. I've got the perspective of a mom who struggled with infertility, who almost used IVF. I've got the perspective of a husband and dad who regrets him and his wife using IVF. I've got so many perspectives on this subject. It's not just my opinion. I've got a child safety expert giving her opinion. The fact of the matter is these embryos that are created through IVF are so often discarded and definitely frozen. And that is the unknowingly the gamble, many cases unknowingly, the gamble that every couple takes when they do IVF. I would say no Christian couple goes into IVF thinking that they want to destroy their embryos or leave their embryos frozen. IVF was not their first desire. They, of course, wanted to get pregnant naturally. So it's a very hard, very sensitive thing. And I really understand that. And yet so many are convinced to create 4 or 5 embryos. They only end up being able to transfer 2. Then they're left with those 3 image bearers of God, ensouled image bearers of God. And what's a parent to do in that case? So that's the difficulty. That's why we have over 1 million ensouled image bearer embryos on ice right now. It's a travesty. And so saying that we are going to subsidize those, that we are going to pay taxes to subsidize that process, which almost always includes a eugenics process and the destruction of embryos, is so wrong. Donald Trump himself has said that we're going to do that when he becomes president. I do not think that will actually happen under Donald Trump, but Gavin Newsom, he's already beat him to the punch. So the law is SB 729 by Senator Caroline Menjivar, which requires large group healthcare service plan contracts, so employers that cover at least 100 people, and disability insurance policies to provide coverage for the diagnosis and treatment of infertility and fertility service, including in vitro fertilization. So this includes, by the way, the 2 men that are buying the eggs from one woman and renting the womb of another woman. The new law broadens the definition of infertility so that same-sex couples can be treated. So you will be forced in the state of California to pay with your dollars the creation of motherless children. Making intrauterine insemination and IVF more accessible and affordable, they say, is key to achieving reproductive equity for LGBTQ plus people. See, it's not about the babies. It's not about making families. It's about adults' wants. It's about adults validating and justifying their sexual immorality. What do we always say? Children are always the unconsenting subjects of progressive social experiments. Whether it's COVID policies like mask mandates, whether it's child sacrifice like abortion, whether it's the redefinition of marriage and family, whether it is reproductive technology. What do we also say? That when technology takes us from what is natural to what is possible, Christians have the obligation to ask, but is this moral? Is this biblical? Not all technology is bad. Not all reproductive methods carry with it the same ethical problems that we see in IVF. But here, because we are making image bearers of God, because we are raising these babies, we should be looking to science, which says you need a man and a woman to create a child, to also tell us how you need to raise a child in an ideal situation. We should be looking to creation to tell us what the definition of marriage and family is. Again, every law comes from a particular worldview. Christians have been manipulated into thinking that we are the only ones that have to check our worldview at the door before we vote, before we talk about policy, and children are dying because of that wicked compartmentalization. Stand on the side of life, stand on the side of children, stand on the side of the most vulnerable. Think about these issues from a truth and love perspective rather than the perspective of toxic empathy, because lives are on the line because of that. All right, that's all we've got time for. I do just want to remind you guys to subscribe to Blaze Unlimited. They've got a beautiful new magazine that will come out quarterly, Frontier, original commentary, amazing journalism. Be a founding member and support us. Go to blazeunlimited.com/Allie to claim your spot. All right. Thanks so much, guys. We'll see you back here on Monday.